The air inside the Velvet Rose was kept at exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Not 67, not 69, 68. Precision mattered here. This wasn't just another restaurant on Manhattan's Upper East Side where senators argued over veal piccata and hedge fund managers celebrated their latest conquests. This was neutral ground, sacred ground, the kind of place where men who traded in human misery could break bread without worrying about bullets in their linguini. The crystal chandeliers cast amber light across white tablecloths that cost more to launder than most New Yorkers paid in rent. A jazz quartet played Coltrane in the corner, their notes floating through cigar smoke and expensive perfume. Waiters moved like ghosts between tables, trained to see everything and remember nothing. The elite came here to feel safe, to forget for one evening that their empires were built on bones. At table 3, a senator from Connecticut negotiated the price of his silence. At table 5, a man with too many rings and not enough morals discussed shipping routes with someone who definitely wasn't supposed to be in the country. At table 7, a woman in diamonds that could fund a small hospital laughed at a joke that wasn't funny because the man telling it owned half of Brooklyn. But none of them mattered. All eyes eventually drifted to table 1. Marcus Volkov sat at the epicenter of the room's gravity. He was 6'3" of controlled violence wrapped in a charcoal Brioni suit that cost $8,500. The fabric had been tailored on Savile Row by Anderson and Shepard, cut specifically to hide the shoulder holster beneath his left arm. At 31 years old, Marcus had the kind of face that belonged on Roman coins. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could break knuckles, eyes the color of gunmetal that had seen things most men only experienced in nightmares. He didn't raise his voice. Ever. His subordinates had learned to lean in, to strain to hear him, because volume was for the insecure. Marcus Volkov had nothing to prove. He was the king of New York's underworld. He owned the shadows. The darkness answered to him. Across from him sat Igor Petrov, a Russian lieutenant with too much ambition and not enough sense. They were arguing about dock territories. The usual dance, threats disguised as negotiations, violence wrapped in diplomacy. "You take the docks, I take the skyline," Igor said, his accent thick as Moscow winter. "That was the deal, Volkov." Marcus didn't blink. "The deal expired when you tried to move heroin through my shipping containers without asking permission." His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the table. Quiet, deadly, the kind of sound a predator makes right before it strikes. Igor's hand twitched toward his jacket. Bad idea. Vincent Cross, Marcus's second in command, sat 2 feet away. 38 years old, too much hair gel, too little patience. His hand was already inside his coat, fingers wrapped around cold steel. Vincent had killed 17 men in service to the Volkov family. He'd kill 18 if Igor's hand moved another inch. "More Pinot Noir." Vincent snapped at the approaching server. Not a request, a command. The server nodded. Sarah Mitchell, 26 years old, blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun, green eyes that stayed carefully lowered. She'd been working at the Velvet Rose for 3 weeks. Invisible, boring, forgettable, exactly as she'd planned. She moved to the table, the bottle of 1982 Chateau Margaux heavy in her hand. $3,000 worth of fermented grapes. Her left wrist throbbed, an old injury flaring up from the rain that lashed the streets outside. But she kept her grip steady. Her hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Not after 5 years of training for this exact moment. She leaned in to pour. Professional, careful, invisible. Then Marcus's hand slammed onto the table. The impact was explosive. Silverware jumped. The wine glass teetered. Igor had said something about percentages, about territories, about respect, and Marcus had responded the only way he knew how. With force. With fury contained in the architecture of his bones. Sarah flinched. Just a fraction. Just enough. The bottleneck clipped the edge of the wine glass. Time slowed. The glass tipped. Red wine erupted across the pristine white tablecloth like arterial spray. But worse, far worse, a dark stain began to spread across the lapel of Marcus's charcoal suit. It looked like blood. It spread like blood. In the amber light of the Velvet Rose, it might as well have been blood. The entire restaurant went silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The piano player's fingers stumbled over keys. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the senator at table 3 stopped lying long enough to watch. Everyone in New York's 5 families knew 3 rules about Marcus Volkov. Never lie to him, never steal from him, and never ever spill wine on his $8,000 suit. Sarah stepped back, clutching the empty bottle, Her mouth went dry. I am so sorry, sir. I'll get a towel. I can... Marcus stood up. He towered over her, 6'3" of condensed rage wearing Italian wool. But he didn't yell. He didn't strike her. That would have been mercy. That would have been quick. Instead, he adjusted his cuffs. His expression was one of utter boredom and complete disgust. The look a man gives an insect he's about to crush beneath his shoe. He turned to Vincent, dismissing Sarah entirely. When he spoke, it was in rapid, low-toned Russian, the language of the inner circle, the language they used when Americans weren't supposed to understand. Uberi etu grayaz moich glaz. Get this filth out of my sight. Ona pachnet deshowym mylom a provolom. She smells like cheap soap and failure. Skazi menedżeru, chtobi uvolil eo, prejde chem ja virechu ye jezik. Tell the manager to fire her before I cut out her tongue. Vincent laughed, a cruel barking sound that made nearby diners shift in their seats. Consider it done, boss. Marcus turned his back on her, reached for his napkin to dab at the stain, dismissed her existence like she was already dead. Sarah stood there. The fear that had been gripping her throat vanished, replaced by something cold, something familiar. A rage she hadn't felt in 5 years, not since the night they dumped her body in the East River and left her for dead. The trembling in her hands stopped. Her posture shifted. The slouch of the exhausted waitress disappeared. Her spine straightened, her shoulders squared. The grace of a soldier replacing the shuffle of the servant. She took one step forward, then she spoke. Vine ochin nabludatelny dla cheloveka scenoi na golovu. The words cut through the restaurant like a serrated blade. Not loud, she didn't need volume. The accent did the work, native Russian, not American trying to mimic sounds. This was the dialect of St. Petersburg, the dialect spoken in the high councils, the dialect of power. You aren't very observant for a man with a price on his head. Marcus froze. His hand halted mid-wipe on his lapel. For the first time in a decade, Marcus Volkov looked genuinely stunned. He whipped around to face her. Sarah's eyes locked onto his. No fear there. Only cold calculation. Only fury wrapped in control. She switched to English. The cadence was lethal. And for the record, it's not cheap soap. It's lavender. Maybe if you weren't so busy choking on your own ego, you'd notice the man at the bar has been photographing your documents for the last 20 minutes. The silence in the room became heavy enough to crush bones. Marcus stared at her. His brain was processing possibilities at light speed. Waitress, Russian speaker, high council dialect, observant enough to spot surveillance. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some girl who got lucky with Rosetta Stone. This was a plant. Sarah dropped the empty wine bottle on the table. It didn't break. It just thudded with finality. I quit, she said. She turned on her heel and walked toward the front door. Her steps were measured, confident, the walk of someone who knew exactly how many guns were pointed at her back and didn't care. Marcus watched her go, watched her push through the heavy oak doors out into the rain-soaked Manhattan night. Then his predator instincts kicked in. Get the man at the bar, he said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Vincent and 2 guards swarmed the man Sarah had indicated, a businessman type, suit slightly too cheap for this establishment, briefcase on the floor beside his stool. He was already reaching for his phone when Vincent's hand clamped down on his wrist. They found the camera within seconds. Miniature, military grade, disguised as a tie clip, the kind of equipment that cost 6 figures and came from government contractors. The man didn't even get a chance to scream before they dragged him out the back exit. Marcus sat back down, ignored the wine stain spreading across his chest. He stared at the swinging kitchen doors where the waitress had vanished. Igor cleared his throat. Boss, you want me to... Shut up, Marcus said pleasantly. I'm thinking. Vincent returned, wiping his hands on a handkerchief. The photographer won't be a problem anymore. You want me to grab the girl? No, Marcus said slowly. I want to know who she is. Just a waitress. Name is Sarah Mitchell. We ran a background check when we hired her 3 weeks ago. Clean as snow. Marcus's eyes narrowed. A waitress with a clean background check who speaks high Russian and spots surveillance operatives better than my head of security? He stood up, buttoning his stained jacket. She's not a waitress, Vincent. She's a ghost. 30 minutes later, Marcus sat in the back of his armored Cadillac Escalade. Rain hammered the bulletproof windows. The city lights blurred into streaks of neon in desperation. Taylor Ramsey sat in the front seat, fingers flying across a laptop keyboard, 24 years old. MIT dropout. Genius-level IQ trapped in the body of someone who survived on energy drinks and spite. Marcus had recruited him after the kid hacked into the FBI's witness protection database on a dare. They called him Zero because that's how many traces he left behind. "I'm telling you, boss, it's weird," Zero said, his southern accent thickening with concentration. "Sarah Mitchell exists. Born in Ohio. Moved to New York in 2023. Social Security matches. Credit history matches. She's real." "Dig deeper," Marcus commanded. "I am digging." "But wait." Zero paused. His fingers stopped moving. "Okay, this is subtle. Her dental records in the file. They're copy-pasted from a deceased woman in Seattle, and her rental agreement for her apartment in Queens. The landlord is a shell company owned by a holding firm in Zurich." "Zurich," Marcus murmured. The word tasted like old money and older secrets. "Who owns the holding firm?" "It's encrypted. Military-grade boss. Government-level protection. This girl isn't a nobody. This is witness protection-level construction. Or something darker." Zero looked up from his screen, and for the first time since Marcus had known him, the kid looked scared. "She's a ghost." Marcus stared out the window as rain lashed the glass. He felt something strange in his chest, not fear. He'd burned that emotion out of himself years ago. This was different. Intrigue. Obsession. He had insulted her, called her filth, threatened to cut out her tongue, and she had saved his life by pointing out the spy, then humiliated him in front of the 5 families, then vanished into the night like smoke. In Marcus Volkov's world, people who made him feel something were either lovers or corpses. He hadn't had a lover in 6 years. The corpse count was 47. "Find her phone signal," Marcus ordered. "She ditched her burner in the alley behind the restaurant," Zero said, "but I picked up a momentary ping from a secondary device. Satellite signal. Lasted 3 seconds. "Where?" "Meatpacking district. Old industrial loft on 14th Street. Marcus leaned forward. "Go." The building was a converted slaughterhouse, red brick crumbling under decades of New York weather. The kind of place people went to be forgotten, to disappear, to die. Marcus moved up the stairs alone. He'd ordered Vincent to stay in the car. This required precision, subtlety, a scalpel, not a hammer. The third-floor hallway smelled like mold and regret. Door 3B. The lock was simple. Too simple. Marcus picked it in 6 seconds with tools he kept in his jacket lining. The door swung open on oiled hinges. His hand hovered near his holster. The apartment was sparse. A mattress on the floor, a table with a single chair, a hot plate. The accommodations of someone who traveled light, someone who didn't plan to stay. But the wall, the entire eastern wall, was covered in maps. Not maps of New York, maps of Moscow, Kiev, London. Red string-connected photographs of men in suits, crime lords, politicians, ghosts, and there, in the center of the web, was a photograph of Marcus himself. "You're loud for an assassin," a voice came from the shadows. Marcus spun. His hand went to his gun, but he didn't draw, not yet. Sarah Mitchell sat on the windowsill, one leg dangling out into the rainy night, 3 stories above the street. She'd changed out of her waitress uniform. Black tactical cargo pants, fitted thermal shirt that revealed arms carved from determination and violence. She held a suppressed Glock 19 loosely in her hand, resting on her knee. "I'm not an assassin tonight," Marcus said, raising his hand slightly. "If I were, my men would have leveled the building." "True," she agreed. "Vincent is too clumsy for stairs." They stared at each other across the distance. The air between them crackled with electricity. It wasn't just danger, it was chemistry, potent and volatile, and utterly inappropriate. "Who are you?" Marcus asked. "Sarah Mitchell is a fiction," she said. "The dental records gave me away, didn't they? Your hacker is good." "You speak the dialect of the inner circle," Marcus said, taking a step closer. "You saved me from the spy at the bar. Why? You hate me. I saw it in your eyes." "I don't hate you, Marcus. You're just a variable in an equation I'm trying to solve." She hopped down from the windowsill. Graceful. Controlled. She didn't raise the gun, but she didn't holster it either. "And I didn't save you. I just didn't want the FBI raiding the restaurant before I got what I needed." "And what do you need?" "Information," she said, "about the Black Lotus." Marcus stiffened. The Black Lotus was a myth, a legend whispered in back rooms, an organization that supposedly dismantled syndicates from the inside, ghost stories to scare ambitious lieutenants. "That's a fairy tale," Marcus scoffed. "Is it?" She walked over to the wall of maps. Her boots made no sound on the hardwood. She tapped a photograph next to Marcus's picture. It was his father, Roman Volkov, murdered 5 years ago in a car crash that wasn't an accident. Your father was meeting with a contact from the Black Lotus the night he died, she said. I was there. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. You were there. You're lying. You look 24. I'm 26, and I was his bodyguard's daughter. She turned to face him fully, the Glock still in her hand but pointed at the floor now. My name isn't Sarah. It's Elena. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena. Elena Sokolov, the daughter of Alexei Sokolov, his father's most loyal enforcer. The girl who had vanished the same night his father was killed. They'd found pieces of her, clothing, blood, enough to assume she was dead. He remembered her vaguely, a scrawny teenager with braided hair who used to watch them train in the warehouse. She'd been 16 when she disappeared. He'd been 26, too focused on inheriting his father's empire to notice subordinates' children. Elena, he whispered. We thought you were dead. We found pieces. You found what I wanted you to find, Elena said. Her voice dropped an octave, losing the bravado and revealing a sliver of pain beneath. I had to run, Marcus, because the person who killed your father and mine wasn't a stranger. She looked him dead in the eye. The silence of the room amplified her next words. It was your brother, Dmitri. Marcus laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound that echoed off the bare walls. Dmitri is dead. He died in the car crash with them. We buried him. No, Elena said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a gold signet ring. She tossed it to him. Marcus caught it reflexively. He looked at the inscription engraved in the metal. Volkov, it was Dmitri's ring, the one their father had given him on his 21st birthday. But it wasn't scorched, wasn't damaged. It was polished, worn recently, the gold still warm from someone's finger. He's alive, Elena said, moving closer. Close enough that Marcus could smell the lavender soap he'd mocked earlier. It was intoxicating. He's running the Black Lotus, and he's coming for you next. She gestured to the wall. That spy at the bar, he wasn't FBI. He was Dmitri's scout. Your brother knows you're vulnerable. He's been planning this for 5 years. And tonight was supposed to be the night you died. Marcus gripped the ring so hard the metal bit into his palm. His entire world tilted on its axis. The brother he had mourned for 5 years. The brother he had cried over. The brother whose grave he visited every year on the anniversary of the crash. Alive. A monster in the darkness. Why come back now? Marcus asked. His voice was rough, damaged. Elena whispered her answer, looking up at him. For just a second, her vulnerability flashed through the armor. Because I can't kill him alone. I need the ruthless king of New York. And if I refuse, then you die tonight, she said simply. Dmitri's hit squad is 3 minutes away. I saw them on the perimeter cameras. As if on Kiss the Sea, the sound of tires screeching echoed from the street below, heavy boots hitting pavement, the distinctive metallic click of weapons being readied. Marcus looked at the door, then back at Elena. The insult at the restaurant seemed like a lifetime ago. Now there was only war. Do you have a secondary exit? He asked, drawing his weapon. Elena smirked. She racked the slide of her Glock with practiced efficiency. Fire escape. But we have to jump. I hate jumping, Marcus muttered. Try not to spill wine on yourself this time, she teased. Marcus actually smiled. It was a terrifying smile, all teeth and violence. Lead the way, little mouse. Elena laughed, a sound like breaking glass. She kicked the window open, and together they leaped into the darkness just as the apartment door exploded inward. The impact with the pavement was brutal. Elena knew how to fall. She'd been trained by the best. Tuck the shoulder, roll through the momentum, absorb the shock. She came up in a crouch with her weapon raised, scanning for targets. Marcus was less graceful. He landed hard on his left side. A grunt of pain tore from his throat as the expensive Italian wool of his suit tore against wet asphalt. Move, Elena hissed, grabbing his arm. They have thermal optics. If we stay still, we're dead. My leg, Marcus gritted out, testing his weight. Not broken, just twisted. Run on it anyway. Above them, the window of the loft was bathed in red glow. Laser sights, multiple shooters. Bullets began to chew up the brickwork around them, sending shards of masonry raining down into the alley. Elena didn't flinch. She returned fire. 2 controlled shots up toward the fire escape to force their pursuers to duck. Then she dragged the King of New York into the shadows. They didn't take the street. That was a rookie mistake. Too exposed. Too predictable. Elena led him through a maze of service corridors and chain-link fences. She moved with a familiarity that unsettled Marcus. She knew this city's skeleton better than he knew its skin. They burst out onto a service road near the Hudson River. Marcus was limping now, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but his eyes were still scanning for threats, still thinking tactically. "We need a car," Marcus said. "No cars," Elena said, holstering her weapon beneath her jacket. "Gridlock is a trap. Black Lotus has eyes on the traffic cameras." She pointed toward a rusted metal grate in the ground near an underpass. "Storm drain. We go down." Marcus stared at the sewer grate. For a long moment, he didn't move. Marcus Volkov, king of New York, about to crawl through sewage to escape his own dead brother. "You have to be joking. Do you want to be a clean corpse or a dirty survivor?" Marcus scowled. Indignity warred with survival instinct. Survival won. He grabbed the grate and heaved it open. The smell that wafted up was exactly as horrible as expected. "After you, princess," he said. They descended into darkness. The smell was damp and metallic. The sound of the city above muffled into a distant hum. They navigated old subway maintenance tunnels, a labyrinth of dripping pipes and graffiti that hadn't seen a worker in 20 years. After an hour of walking in silence, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a throbbing ache in Marcus's leg and a burning curiosity that demanded answers. "You said you were there," Marcus's voice echoed in the tunnel. "The night my father died. You said you saw Dmitri do it." Elena didn't look back. She kept her flashlight trained on the slick path ahead, watching for rats and worse things. "I was 21, not a child. I was my father's apprentice. We were doing a final security sweep of the garage before your father's meeting. I saw Dmitri under the Mercedes with tools. He said he was fixing the brake line that had been acting up all week." Her voice cracked slightly. "I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was family." The next morning, the news broke. My father was driving that car. He died behind the wheel when the brakes failed on the embankment. Marcus stopped walking. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Elena stopped too. She turned, the flashlight beam cutting across Marcus's face. "Tell who? You? You were 26, grieving, drunk half the time. Vincent was already ambitious enough to be dangerous. If I had spoken up, Dmitri would have killed me before I finished the sentence." She took a step closer. "You lost a father, Marcus. I lost my entire world. My father died in that crash. Your father died. And Dmitri, he came for me that same night. Said I'd seen too much. Had his men beat me. Put a gun to my head and pulled the trigger." Marcus's eyes widened. "The gun misfired." He laughed. "Said fate wanted me alive to suffer. Had his men dump me in the East River with weights chained to my ankles." She pulled down the collar of her thermal shirt. There, just above her collarbone, was a puckered scar. Old. Faded. The kind you get from a bullet that almost killed you. "I stayed underwater for 4 minutes using an air pocket in a shipping container. The current carried me 3 miles. They thought I drowned. I let them think it." Marcus looked at her. Really looked at her. Stripped of the waitress uniform and the pretense, he saw her clearly for the first time. The faint white scar through her eyebrow, the calluses on her trigger finger, the burn mark on her left shoulder from rope abrasions. She wasn't a subordinate. She wasn't a servant. She was a survivor of the same war that had defined his entire adult life. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. The words tasted foreign in his mouth. He never apologized. Apologies were weakness, but standing in a flooded tunnel beneath Manhattan, watching this woman who had every reason to hate him, every reason to let him die, he meant it. Elena's expression softened. "Just a fraction." "Don't apologize," she said quietly. "Just help me kill him." And in that moment, in the darkness beneath the city he ruled, Marcus Volkov made a choice. He chose the woman who had humiliated him over the brother he had mourned for 5 years. It was the easiest decision he'd ever made. They emerged in Queens, Industrial Park, auto body shops with metal shutters pulled down for the night. Elena led him to a storage unit facility that looked like it had been forgotten by time. She punched a code into the keypad of Unit 404. The door rolled up to reveal not a pile of forgotten furniture, but a tactical safe house. A cot, a first aid station, a rack of encrypted servers humming quietly in the corner, and a wall of weapons that would make a small country jealous. "Welcome to my parlor," she muttered, hitting the lights. Marcus limped to the cot and sat down heavily. He watched as Elena moved around the room. Efficient, economical. She stripped off her wet jacket, revealing sculpted arms and that tattoo on her shoulder blade he'd glimpsed earlier. A black lotus flower with a dagger driven through its center. A reminder? Marcus asked, gesturing to the ink. A promise, she corrected. She grabbed a medical kit from a shelf and pulled a metal chair over to him. Pants off. Marcus raised an eyebrow. At least buy me dinner first. Your ankle is the size of a grapefruit. I need to wrap it. Don't flatter yourself. He undid his belt and slid the ruined suit trousers off. His ankle was indeed purple and swollen. Elena's hands were cool as she applied numbing gel. Her touch was professional, yet the intimacy of the moment was undeniable. The Ruthless Mafia boss, sitting in his boxers in a storage unit, being tended to by the woman he had tried to fire 3 hours ago. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. You have a plan, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. Elena wrapped the bandage tight, securing it with medical tape. Dimitri is coming out of the shadows. He's been operating as a ghost for 5 years, using the alias The Architect. But he has an ego. He wants to reclaim the city he thinks you stole from him. How? He's hosting a masquerade gala tomorrow night. The Pierre Hotel, the Midnight Sun charity ball. Marcus scoffed. That's my territory. Not anymore. He bought the management company last week through shell corporations. He's going to announce his return, not as Dmitry Volkov, dead brother, but as a legitimate businessman who survived the tragic accident and has returned to save the city from crime. She stood up and tossed him a tablet. Specifically your crime. Marcus activated the screen. It was a news report, already seated online but backdated, his face plastered next to a headline, Mafia Don wanted for murder of Waitress. The video showed grainy footage from the Velvet Rose tonight. It showed Marcus arguing with Sarah Mitchell. Then the camera cut. The next clip showed a body, a woman with Elena's build and hair, wearing the Waitress uniform, being fished out of the East River. They used a double, Marcus realized. The world thinks you killed me. And tomorrow night at the gala, Dmitri is going to present evidence linking you to a dozen other murders, terrorist connections, trafficking. He'll play the hero who helps the police take down his evil brother. The FBI will storm your penthouse. Your accounts will be frozen. You'll be hunted down like a dog. Marcus stood up, testing the bandage. It held. The pain was dull now, focused into a sharp point of rage. Then we go to the gala, Marcus said. His voice dropped to that lethal rumble that made grown men shiver. And we remind my brother that you can't take the crown if you don't have a head. We can't just walk in, Elena warned. It's invite only, biometric security, retinal scans. Marcus walked over to the weapon wall. He ran his hand over a customized Sig Sauer P226. He looked back at her, a dark smirk playing on his lips. I'm Marcus Volkov. I don't need an invitation. He paused. But we do need suits. If I'm going to die, Elena, I'm not doing it in a storage unit. I'm doing it in a tuxedo. The next 12 hours were a blur of calculated preparation. They couldn't go to Marcus's tailor. Too many eyes watching. They couldn't use his credit cards. All flagged by now. We need cash, Marcus said. They were sitting on the floor of the storage unit, eating cold protein bars that tasted like cardboard in regret. Elena kicked a duffel bag near the servers. 200,000, stolen from one of Dimitri's couriers last month. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. I like you. You're a thief. I'm a pragmatist. They sourced the clothes from a woman named Madame Rousseau. She operated out of a brownstone in Little Italy. 62 years old, French expatriate, former Mossad operative turned arms dealer and bespoke tailor. She outfitted assassins and spies, provided weapons and Armani in equal measure. She didn't ask questions, just measured them with quick, sharp movements and took the cash. For Marcus, a midnight blue tuxedo with a shawl collar, cut specifically to conceal a shoulder harness. For Elena, a gown that looked like it was woven from liquid darkness. Black silk that clung to every curve with a slit high up the thigh to allow access to the knife that would be strapped to her leg. By 7 p.m., the transformation was complete. Marcus stood in front of a cracked mirror in the back of Madame Rousseau's shop. He adjusted his bow tie. He looked every inch the billionaire kingpin. But there was a new hardness in his eyes, a resolution that hadn't been there before. He turned when he heard the curtain rustle. Elena stepped out. Marcus stopped breathing. The waitress with the cheap soap was gone. The tactical soldier was gone. In their place stood a queen of the underworld. The dress left her back bare, exposing the scars of her past. But she wore them like jewelry, like medals of honor. She had pulled her hair up, leaving her neck exposed. The neck Marcus had threatened to cut just hours ago. The neck he now found himself staring at with a hunger that had nothing to do with violence. "Stop staring," Elena said, though her cheeks flushed slightly. "You'll wrinkle the suit." "You look dangerous," Marcus said. "Good, that's the point." She handed him a mask, Venetian-style half-face, matte black with silver filigree. "Put it on. Until we make our move, you're just another wealthy donor. And you?" She held up her own mask, delicate lace and obsidian feathers. "I'm your +1." They took a black town car arranged by Madame Rousseau to the Pierre Hotel. The rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and glittering under streetlights. Inside the car, the silence was heavy. Marcus reached out and covered Elena's hand with his. She didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold. His were warm. "If we don't make it out," Marcus started. "Don't," she cut him off. "No speeches." "Not a speech," Marcus said, turning her hand over and tracing the calluses on her palm. "A fact. I insulted you because I was bored. I thought everyone in my world was either a sycophant or a target. You were the first real thing I'd seen in years. I regret the words." Elena looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "You're a bad man, Marcus." "I know. But maybe—" She leaned in closer, the scent of lavender filling the space between them. "You're the right kind of bad man for me." The car stopped. The driver tapped on the glass. "We're here." The moment shattered, but the energy remained, vibrating between them like a pulled guitar string. They stepped out into the red carpet, knowing one of them might not walk off it alive. What they didn't know was that Dmitri had planned for both of them to die tonight, and 300 witnesses would watch it happen. The Pierre Hotel rose like a cathedral of wealth above Fifth Avenue. 42 stories of steel and glass and old money, the kind of building where oil barons died in their sleep and tech billionaires were born over breakfast meetings. Tonight it was dressed for slaughter. The red carpet stretched from the street to the gilded doors like a river of blood. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions at masked figures in $1,000 gowns and tuxedos that cost more than cars. This was New York at its most decadent, its most beautiful, its most corrupt. Marcus and Elena stepped out of the town car into the chaos. The cameras loved them. Mystery couple. Perfect bones. The kind of genetic lottery winners who looked like they belonged in old Hollywood. Marcus in his midnight blue tuxedo. Elena in that dress that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved through the crowd like sharks through a school of fish. Elena's hand rested lightly on Marcus's arm. To any observer, they were just another power couple, another billionaire and his trophy date. But her fingers were positioned over the pressure point in his elbow. If he needed to draw his weapon quickly, she could release him in half a second. They'd practiced in the storage unit, 300 repetitions until it was muscle memory. The entrance to the Pierre was controlled chaos. Guests filtered through security checkpoints disguised as hospitality, smiling men in earpieces who weren't hotel security. These were professionals, mercenaries. "Serbian paramilitary," Elena whispered, leaning close enough that her lips brushed his ear. "Dmitri's favorites. He used them in Moscow." Marcus filed the information away. Serbians meant discipline, training. They wouldn't panic easily. The first checkpoint was a metal detector dressed up as an archway covered in flowers, useless against ceramic weapons. Marcus and Elena both carried polymer frame pistols. They walked through without a beep. The second checkpoint was more serious. Retinal scanners. A polite woman in a black dress that screamed former military gestured them forward. "Just a quick scan for our guest list verification. Look into the device, please." Marcus stepped up to the scanner. His heart rate didn't change. He'd done this before. In his pocket was a jammer, a device the size of a key fob that Zero had built 3 years ago. It worked by flooding the scanner with infrared noise, making it impossible to get a clean read. The beam hit his eye. Marcus pressed the button in his pocket. The machine beeped. "Error. Manual override required." The woman frowned. "Sir, I'm sorry. Could you please look again?" Marcus didn't look again. Instead, he looked at her. Really looked at her. Let all 6'3" of controlled violence show in his eyes. Let her see exactly what kind of man she was dealing with. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, cultured, absolutely terrifying. "Do you know who I am?" The woman hesitated. "I am Victor St. Cloud. I own the bank that holds the mortgage on this hotel. I own the company that provides your security systems. And I own the firm that hired you." None of this was true. Victor St. Cloud was a name Marcus had invented 30 seconds ago. but he delivered it with such absolute conviction that doubt flickered across her face. "If you make me stand here another second," Marcus continued, "I will make a phone call, and tomorrow morning you will wake up to discover that your employment has been terminated. Your pension has been revoked, and the apartment you rent in Astoria is being foreclosed upon." The line behind them was growing. Impatient, wealthy people who didn't like to wait. A senator. A media mogul. A man who definitely ran a cartel, but nobody could prove it. A supervisor appeared. Older. Sharper. He looked at Marcus, then at the growing line, then made a calculation. "Let him through," the supervisor said. "Manual verification." They walked into the grand ballroom. It was a sea of masks and malice. 300 people who collectively controlled more wealth than most countries. They moved through the crowd drinking champagne that cost more per glass than a factory worker made in a week. They laughed at jokes that weren't funny. They smiled with teeth that had been surgically perfected. The ballroom itself was a masterpiece of excess. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung from the ceiling. Each one weighed half a ton. Each one cost more than a house. The walls were paneled in wood that had been imported from forests that no longer existed. The floors were marble, quarried from mountains in Italy. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. The music floated through the crowd like a ghost. And at the far end of the room, on a raised dais, stood a man in a white mask and a white tuxedo. Even with the mask, Marcus knew. The way he held his champagne glass, the tilt of his head, the slight favor of his left leg from an old injury, an injury from a car crash that should have killed him. Dmitri, his brother, alive. After 5 years of being dead, Marcus felt his blood run cold. Elena's hand tightened on his arm. She'd seen him too. "Wait," she whispered. "Look at the balcony." Marcus's eyes tracked up. The balcony that ringed the ballroom was supposed to be for additional seating, but tonight it was empty, except for 4 figures in the shadows, red dots occasionally visible. Snipers. "We need a distraction," Marcus said quietly. "I have one," Elena replied. She reached into her clutch. The bag was small, barely big enough for lipstick and a phone, but Elena had modified it, removed the lining, created a false bottom. She pulled out a small metallic sphere, slightly smaller than a golf ball. "Flashbang," she whispered. "Modified for low noise but high visual disruption. Won't hurt anyone, just blind them." Subtle. "I told you I'm not a waitress." The music stopped. A spotlight hit the dais. The crowd quieted, turning toward the stage like flowers toward the sun. Dmitri stepped forward to the microphone. When he spoke, his voice was smooth, cultured. The voice of a man who had spent 5 years reinventing himself. It boomed over speakers hidden throughout the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the Midnight Sun Gala. Your generosity tonight will fund programs that help at-risk youth across our city." Polite applause. Nobody here cared about at-risk youth, but they cared about the tax deductions. "Tonight is a night of revelations," Dmitri continued. "For too long, this city has been held hostage by darkness, by corruption, by organized crime." A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't the usual charity ball speech, specifically by the Volkov crime family. The murmur became a buzz, heads turned, people whispered behind masks. Dmitri gestured to the massive screen behind him. It flickered to life. Footage began to play. First, the doctored video from the Velvet Rose. Marcus arguing with Sarah Mitchell. The footage was edited to make him look aggressive, threatening. Then it cut to the body in the river. The woman who looked like Elena, but wasn't. "This woman was murdered last night," Dmitri said, "by Marcus Volkov, a man who runs this city through fear and violence." More footage. A warehouse fire. Faces superimposed to implicate Marcus. A judge's car exploding. More digital manipulation. Each clip was a masterpiece of fabrication. Each one looked real enough to convince a jury. "But it doesn't end there," Dmitri said. New footage. This was live. Current. It showed Marcus's penthouse. FBI agents swarming through rooms. Vincent Cross in handcuffs being dragged out. Evidence bags being filled. This wasn't happening tomorrow. This was happening now, right now. While Marcus stood in this ballroom, Elena grabbed his arm hard enough to bruise. "He didn't frame you for tomorrow. He already did it. This is the victory lap." Marcus's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Vincent, his most loyal man, being arrested while Marcus played dress-up. I have worked with federal authorities, Dmitry continued, to bring this criminal to justice. Tonight, we celebrate not just charity, but the beginning of a new era for New York. An era without the Volkovs. The crowd applauded, some reluctantly, some enthusiastically. The senator looked pleased. The media mogul was already pulling out his phone to break the story. Now, Marcus said quietly. Elena didn't hesitate. She rolled the metallic sphere under the nearest table. It bounced once, twice. Came to rest beneath a group of socialites discussing real estate. 3, 2, 1, bang! The flash was blinding. Pure white light that turned the ballroom into a supernova for 3 full seconds. Screams erupted. The elite of New York, who had never experienced real violence in their insulated lives, panicked like sheep. People scrambled for exits. Women kicked off heels to run faster. Men shoved each other aside. The careful veneer of civilization cracked, and underneath was just animal fear. Go, Marcus roared. He didn't run for the exit. He ran for the stage. Elena was right beside him. She lifted the hem of her gown with one hand. With the other, she drew her Glock from the holster strapped to her thigh. The knife stayed in place. She might need it later. A guard stepped into Marcus's path. Big man, shaved head, Serbian flag tattooed on his neck. He was reaching for his weapon when Marcus hit him. Not a punch, a strike. Marcus drove his fist into the man's throat with surgical precision. The guard dropped like his strings had been cut. Marcus snatched the fallen weapon. A Beretta M9, 15 rounds. 2 more guards converged from the left. Elena handled them without breaking stride. She put 2 rounds into the marble floor at their feet. The ricochet and marble shrapnel made them dive for cover. Not lethal, but effective. They vaulted onto the stage together. Dmitry stood there. He'd removed his white mask. His face was a study in contrast. The right side was the brother Marcus remembered. Handsome, sharp features, cold eyes. The left side was a nightmare. Burn scars ran from his jaw to his temple. The skin was puckered and discolored. Souvenirs from a car crash that should have killed him. When he saw Marcus, he didn't look scared. He looked delighted. Marcus! Dmitry shouted over the chaos. He spread his arms wide like he was welcoming a prodigal son. You actually came. I won the bet. It's over, Dmitry, Marcus said. His voice cut through the screaming. Whatever you're planning ends now. Over? Dmitry laughed. It was a broken sound, like glass grinding against glass. Brother, we haven't even started the main course. He snapped his fingers. From the curtains behind the stage, men emerged, not the Serbian guards. These were different, heavily armored, tactical gear, body armor, night vision goggles pushed up on their foreheads. They carried Heckler & Koch MP-7 submachine guns, shock troops. But the real horror wasn't the soldiers. It was the person Dmitry dragged out from behind the podium. Vincent Cross, Marcus's second in command, his most loyal soldier, the man who had killed 17 people in service to the Volkov family. He was barely recognizable. His face was a ruin of bruises and blood. One eye was swollen completely shut. His nose was clearly broken. He was on his knees, and Dmitry had a gun pressed to his temple. Not just any gun. Their father's gun, a Makarov PM, the weapon Roman Volkov had carried for 30 years. You have a choice, Marcus, Dmitry said. His voice was pleasant, conversational, like he was discussing the weather. Drop your gun and I kill Vincent quickly. 1 bullet. He won't feel a thing. Keep your gun and I kill him slowly. I'll start with his knees, then his elbows, then his fingers, one at a time. And when he's begging for death, when he's crying for his mother, then I'll kill your little waitress. And then I'll kill you. The room had cleared now. Only the players remained. The standoff was absolute. Marcus's gun was trained on Dmitry's head. Center mass, an easy shot. Elena's gun was trained on the shock troops. 12-1 odds. Not good. Dmitry's gun was pressed against Vincent's skull. Vincent wheezed. Blood bubbled past his lips. Don't, he managed to say. Boss, don't do it. It's a trap. Such loyalty, Dmitry mocked. It's disgusting. Father would have been proud of this one. More loyal than his own sons. Marcus stared at his brother. The brother who had supposedly died 5 years ago. The brother he had mourned. The brother whose grave he visited. A monster wearing his brother's face. In this world, you had to choose who survived. His father had taught him that. Ruthless pragmatism. You couldn't save everyone. So you saved the people who mattered most. But who mattered most? Vincent, who had served loyally for a decade? Or exposing Dmitri for what he was? Marcus looked at Elena. She met his eyes. No fear there. Only calculation. Cold mathematics. She gave him a microscopic nod, so slight that only someone watching closely would see it. She had a plan. Marcus slowly raised his hands. Okay, okay, Dmitri, you win. He dropped the Beretta. It clattered on the wooden stage. Dmitri grinned, a feral, victorious expression that split his scarred face. Good boy, just like when we were children. You always did what I told you. He moved the gun away from Vincent's head, aimed it at Marcus instead. Now we can talk like civilized people. That was the mistake. The split second when the gun wasn't pressed against Vincent's skull. Now, Elena screamed. She didn't shoot Dmitri. She couldn't. Not with 12 shock troops who would fill her with bullets before she pulled the trigger. Instead, she shot the chandelier, the massive crystal fixture that hung directly above the stage. Half a ton of imported crystal and hand-forged iron. A relic from a different era when excess was expected. Her bullet hit the main support chain. Once, twice, 3 times. The metal screamed, groaned, then sheared. Dmitri looked up. Too late. The chandelier plummeted. It fell like God's own hammer. Crystal fragments caught the light as it descended, creating a galaxy of reflections. Beautiful. Terrible. It hit the stage between Marcus and the shock troops with the force of a bomb. The wooden stage splintered, cracked. Glass shards flew like shrapnel, embedding in walls, in curtains, in flesh. A dust cloud erupted, turning the air into a thick fog. In the confusion, Marcus moved. He didn't dive for cover. He dove for Vincent. His hands found his second-in-command's shoulders. He dragged him backwards, off the edge of the stage, just as the shock troops opened fire blindly through the dust cloud. Bullets chewed through wood and plaster. The beautiful ballroom was being torn apart. Marcus, Elena, and Vincent huddled behind the heavy oak bar near the stage. It was solid, built from wood that was probably older than in the country. It would stop bullets. For now. Is he dead? Elena asked. She was already reloading her magazine. Muscle memory from 5 years of training. Dmitri? Marcus wiped glass dust from his eyes. A chandelier won't kill him. He's a cockroach. We're pinned down, Vincent coughed. Blood splattered on the marble floor. Boss, the back exit, the kitchen. I rigged it. Marcus looked at Vincent, really looked at him. One eye swollen shut, nose broken, ribs probably fractured, but still thinking tactically. You rigged it? I knew, Vincent gasped. His breathing was labored, painful. When they grabbed me from the penthouse 6 hours ago, they transported me through the service entrance. I saw the kitchen, load-bearing columns. I had C4 in my jacket lining. Always carry it. Old habit. He held up his wrist, an expensive Rolex. Their father had given it to him 10 years ago as a reward for loyalty. Detonator is in the watch. Been waiting for you to show up. Marcus felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Gratitude, pride. This man had been beaten, tortured, used as a hostage. And still he'd been thinking 3 steps ahead. Blow it, Marcus said. It'll bring the roof down, Elena warned. On us. Not if we're fast, Marcus said. He looked at her. Do you trust me? I'm starting to, she replied. Then run. Vincent triggered the watch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the back of the Pierre Hotel erupted. The explosion wasn't loud. It was beyond loud. It was a physical force that traveled through stone and steel and human bone. The shockwave knocked the mercenaries off their feet, knocked paintings off walls, shattered every remaining window in the ballroom. The wall behind the bar disintegrated, just ceased to exist. One moment it was there. The next it was rubble and dust and a gaping hole to the rainy night outside. Marcus grabbed Vincent, threw him over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. The man screamed in pain, but Marcus didn't have time for gentle. Elena was already moving. She covered their rear, firing controlled bursts at shapes in the dust. Not aiming to kill, just to keep heads down. They sprinted through the smoke and debris. The ballroom was collapsing behind them. The load-bearing columns Vincent had destroyed were critical. Without them, the ceiling began to fail. Plaster and wood and crystal rained down. The beautiful ballroom was being buried in its own excess. They reached the jagged edge where the wall used to be. 3 stories down, an alley. Jump, Elena shouted. They jumped. The fall was brutal. Marcus twisted in midair, trying to protect Vincent. They hit the wet pavement hard enough to drive the air from his lungs. Pain exploded through his left shoulder. Elena landed in a controlled roll, came up already scanning for threats. Behind them, the ballroom finished collapsing. The entire back section of the Pierre Hotel folded in on itself like a house of cards. Dust and debris billowed out into the night. They lay there for a moment, gasping for air. Alive. Improbably, impossibly alive. Then Marcus heard it. A single shot. The sound came from above, from the remaining ledge of the ruined ballroom. He looked up just as pain blossomed in his chest. He looked down. A red flower was spreading across his white shirt, right over his heart. The fabric turned crimson, soaked through in seconds. He stumbled. His legs didn't want to work anymore. He fell to his knees. "Marcus!" Elena screamed. She caught him before he hit the ground. Her hands went to the wound immediately. Pressure. Stop the bleeding. Basic field medicine. Marcus looked up. High on the remaining ledge, silhouetted against the flames, stood a figure. Half his face was bleeding. His white suit was gray with dust. But he was standing. Dmitri. He lowered his smoking gun, their father's gun, and he smiled. Then he vanished into the smoke. Marcus lay on the wet pavement. Rain was falling now, mixing with his blood, creating pink rivulets that ran into the gutter. The woman who had vowed to kill him was frantically trying to save his life. He wanted to tell her something important. But the words would not come. The world was getting dark around the edges. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness took him was her face, beautiful and terrible and desperate. Then nothing. Vincent drove the stolen sedan with one hand. His other clutched his bruised ribs. Every breath was agony, but he didn't slow down. In the back seat, Elena waged war against death. "Stay with me, Marcus," she commanded. Her hands were slick with his blood. She was pressing wadded gauze against his chest just below the collarbone. The bullet had missed his heart, but it had nicked an artery. Blood was pumping out with each heartbeat. Too much blood. Marcus's face was gray, his eyes unfocused. Shock was setting in. "You're ruining your dress," he rasped. A faint, delirious smile touched his lips. "Shut up," she choked out. Her voice was trembling. "If you die, I'll kill you." "Paradox," Marcus mumbled. Then his eyes rolled back. "Vincent, drive faster," Elena screamed. They didn't go to a hospital. Hospitals meant questions. Questions meant police. Police meant FBI. FBI meant a cell. They went to a veterinary clinic in Yonkers, basement level, run by a man named Dr. James Reed, 52 years old, former Army combat medic, 3 tours in Afghanistan. He'd seen more trauma than most ER doctors. He'd put soldiers back together with duct tape and prayer. He owed the Volkov family. Marcus had gotten him out of a gambling debt 3 years ago, the kind of debt that ends with your family finding pieces of you in different boroughs. He was waiting at the service entrance when they pulled up. "I heard what happened," Dr. Reed said. "Prepared the OR. We have maybe 2 hours before morning shift arrives." They rushed Marcus inside. The next 8 hours were a nightmare of fluorescent lights and the steady beep of cardiac monitors. Elena paced the hallway outside the operating room, still wearing the ruined black gown, still covered in Marcus's blood. She looked like a bride from hell. She scrubbed at her hands. The blood came off, but she could still feel the warmth of it, the sticky thickness, the way it had pulsed between her fingers with each weakening heartbeat. When Dr. Reed finally emerged, he looked exhausted. His scrubs were soaked with blood and sweat. "He's stable," he said. Elena slumped against the wall. Her legs gave out. She slid down until she hit the floor. "Lost a lot of blood. The lung collapsed. But I patched the vessel. He's strong." He paused. "He'll live." Elena buried her face in her hands. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath for 8 hours. When she finally walked into the recovery room, Marcus was awake, pale, hooked up to an IV, shirtless with a massive bandage across his chest. But awake, alive. He watched her come in. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was the quiet after a storm, the stillness that comes when the worst has passed. "You stayed," Marcus said. His voice was rough, damaged. "I had to," Elena replied. She pulled a metal chair to his bedside. "You owe me a new dress." Marcus tried to laugh. It turned into a wheeze that made him wince. He reached out his hand. She took it. This time, she interlaced her fingers with his. "Why?" "Why?" Marcus asked. His thumb traced her knuckles. "I treated you like garbage. I represent everything you should hate. Why save me?" Elena whispered her answer. She looked at their joined hands. "Because the world isn't black and white, Marcus. It's gray. And in the gray, you're the only one who keeps his word. Dmitri is chaos. You are order." She hesitated, looked up into his steel gray eyes. And I don't want to be alone anymore. Marcus squeezed her hand. Come here. She leaned in, closer. I promise you, Marcus whispered. The intensity in his eyes burned brighter than fever. I will never insult you again. I will never look past you. From now on, you are the only thing I see. He kissed her. It tasted of antiseptic and iron, but underneath was fire, was promise, was a blood oath sealed between two people who had survived hell. The moment was broken by the door opening. Vincent limped in. His face was still a mess, but he'd been bandaged. He carried a tablet. Sorry to interrupt, he said, though he looked relieved to see his boss awake. But we have a problem. He handed the tablet to Elena. She held it up so Marcus could see. It was a live stream, broadcasting from Volkov Tower. The boardroom. Dmitri sat at the head of the massive conference table. Around him were the heads of the 5 families, the real power in New York's underworld. Don Moretti, Italian family, 68 years old, ran gambling and protection. Mikhail Sokolov, Russian family. Elena's distant uncle, controlled the docks. Patrick O'Malley, Irish mob, guns and politics. Amir Hassan, Middle Eastern syndicate, money laundering. Carlos Mendoza, Latin American cartels, drugs and trafficking. Together they controlled everything that mattered in the shadows. And they were listening to Dmitri. My brother is dead, Dmitri was saying. His voice carried the perfect note of grief. Killed in the bombing at the Pierre, a terrorist attack that he himself orchestrated to cover his crimes. The Dons nodded, buying it. As the only surviving member of the Volkov family, I claim the seat of chairman. Tonight, we unite the 5 families under new leadership, under the Black Lotus. He's taking everything, Vincent said quietly. By tomorrow morning, you'll be a memory. The FBI has the evidence they need. Your accounts will be frozen. Every cop in the city has your photo. Marcus stared at the screen. The pain in his chest seemed to vanish, replaced by cold, hard resolve. What time does the meeting end? He asked. They're voting in 2 hours, at midnight. Marcus sat up, the heart monitor spiked, beeping rapidly. Marcus, no, Elena said. She put a hand on his shoulder. You can't. You have a hole in your chest. You lost 40% of your blood. You'll kill yourself. Marcus swung his legs off the bed. He gritted his teeth. Sweat popped on his forehead. But he stood. He swayed. Elena caught him. I don't need to fight him with my fists, Marcus said. He steadied himself on her shoulder. I just need to show them I'm alive. A ghost can't lead a family. You can barely walk, Elena argued. Then help me, Marcus said. He looked at her. The ruthless boss was back, diminished, damaged, but unbroken. Help me take back my kingdom, Elena, and when I do, you'll rule it beside me. Elena looked at Vincent, then back at Marcus. She saw the fire in him, the determination. He wouldn't stay in this bed even if she chained him to it. A dangerous smile spread across her face. Fine, but if you bleed out on the carpet, I'm leaving you there. Deal, Marcus said. Then he turned to Vincent. Get the car and get me a suit. I'm not dying in a hospital gown. They had 2 hours to cross the city, infiltrate a building surrounded by FBI, and expose a man who had successfully faked his death for 5 years. Marcus Volkov had survived worse odds, but he'd never done it with a bullet wound in his chest and the woman he loved watching him slowly bleed out. The clock was ticking, and Dmitri Volkov was about to learn that some ghosts don't stay buried. Volkov Tower stood like a monument to ambition in downtown Manhattan. 42 stories of steel and glass, the kind of building that made other buildings feel inadequate. Marcus had built it 12 years ago with money that came from places polite society didn't ask about. It was his kingdom, his fortress. Tonight, the FBI had turned it into his tomb. The service tunnel that Vincent had mentioned was a relic from the 1990s. Back when the Volkov family still smuggled contraband through subway maintenance corridors, the entrance was hidden beneath a grate near the construction site 2 blocks east. Most people walked past it every day without knowing it existed. Elena pushed Marcus's wheelchair through the darkness. The wheels squeaked. Each rotation was a small protest against the indignity of what they were doing. Behind them, Vincent limped along, using the tunnel wall for support. His ribs were wrapped tight enough to restrict breathing, but loose enough to allow movement. They looked like refugees from a war, which in a sense they were. The tunnel smelled like decades of neglect. Water dripped from rusted pipes. Rats scattered from the beam of Elena's flashlight. This was the skeleton of New York. The parts nobody wanted to see. The infrastructure that kept the beautiful parts beautiful. 100 meters, Vincent said. His voice echoed off concrete walls. Should be a service door on the left. They found it. Rusted metal, covered in grime and graffiti from maintenance workers who'd been dead for 20 years. Elena tried the handle. Locked. You said this was accessible, she said. Vincent slumped against the wall. His breathing was labored. It was, 30 years ago. They must have sealed it during the 2015 renovation. Marcus studied the lock. Soviet era, heavy duty, the kind of thing built to survive nuclear war. Can Zero override it remotely? Boss, that's analog. I'd need physical access to the wiring. Elena knelt beside the door. She examined the lock mechanism with the focused intensity of someone who'd spent years learning how things broke. She reached into her tactical bag and pulled out a small package wrapped in black plastic. Thermite. Where did you get thermite? Marcus asked. Madame Rousseau throws it in for free with evening gowns. Good customer service. And she planted the charge on the lock mechanism, set a 15-second timer. Then they wheeled back 20 meters and waited. The explosion was brief, intense. White-hot flame that turned metal into liquid. The lock melted like butter. The door swung open with a groan that sounded almost relieved. No alarm sounded. The building's modern security system didn't interface with Cold War relics. They emerged into Sub-Basement 3. Storage area, old files, forgotten furniture, the archaeological layers of a criminal empire. Boxes stacked to the ceiling contained records that could send 100 men to prison, but nobody looked at them anymore. Digital had replaced paper. Progress had made history irrelevant. Elena pushed the wheelchair to the service elevator. The kind delivery people used, the kind that went directly to the executive floor without stopping. The elevator required biometric authentication, a fingerprint scanner that looked new, expensive, state-of-the-art. Marcus held up his hand, his left hand. The ring finger was missing, an old injury from a deal gone wrong in Chicago 8 years ago. Dimitri took my fingerprints when I was unconscious for the crash, Marcus said. He kept them in case he ever needed to impersonate me for access. He didn't count on me keeping his. He pulled a small vial from his jacket pocket. Inside was a preserved fingerprint on a silicone mold. His brother's fingerprint, taken from a glass years ago and kept for exactly this kind of contingency. Marcus pressed it against the scanner. The machine beeped. Green light. Dmitry Volkov, access granted. The elevator doors opened. They rode up in silence. 41 floors. Each floor a second closer to war. Marcus sat in the wheelchair, his face pale but his eyes hard. Elena stood behind him, one hand resting on the wheelchair handle, the other inside her jacket where her Glock waited. Vincent leaned against the elevator wall, leaving a small smear of blood where his shoulder touched. The elevator chimed. 42nd floor, executive level. The doors opened onto a hallway of polished marble and recessed lighting. Empty. The FBI agents were positioned on the other side of the floor, guarding the main elevators and stairwells. They weren't expecting anyone to come from the service corridor. 50 meters ahead were the boardroom doors. Massive mahogany, hand-carved in Italy. They'd cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Through the frosted glass, Marcus could see silhouettes, seated figures around the conference table. And standing at the head, one figure addressing the others. Dimitri's voice carried through the doors, amplified, confident. All in favor of recognizing Dmitry Volkov as Capo di Tutti Capi, head of the 5 families, raise your hand. Marcus checked his watch. 11:59, 1 minute before midnight. Now, he said. Elena pushed the wheelchair forward. Her steps were silent on the marble. Professional. Controlled. She reached the doors and, without hesitation, threw them open. The doors slammed against the interior walls with a sound like gunshots. Every head in the room turned. Dmitry stood at the head of the table, holding a champagne glass. When he saw Marcus, the glass shattered in his hand. Crystal fragments and liquid spilled onto the polished wood. A grim echo of the wine spill that had started everything. Marcus Volkov wheeled into the boardroom. He was a ghost, a man who was supposed to be dead, buried under rubble at the Pierre Hotel. But here he sat, pale, diminished, but undeniably alive. Beside him stood Elena, no longer in an evening gown. Now she wore tactical black, combat boots, the clothes of someone ready for war. The silence in the room was absolute. Don Moretti, the oldest of the crime lords, gasped. His hand went to his chest. At 68, his heart wasn't built for shocks. Ghost, he whispered. I'm no ghost, Moretti, Marcus said. His voice was quieter than usual. The bullet wound had stolen some of his power, but in the dead silence of the boardroom, His words carried like thunder. I'm just hard to kill. Dmitri recovered quickly, his face twisted into a snarl. He's an imposter, or he's here to assassinate us all. Guards! 4 men stepped from the shadows. Black Lotus operatives, dressed in suits but carrying Heckler and Koch MP7 submachine guns. Military-grade weapons that could turn the boardroom into an abattoir in seconds. They raised their weapons. Elena didn't draw her gun. Instead, she raised her hand. In it was a small remote detonator, red button under her thumb. Don't, she said calmly. Everyone froze. The elevator is rigged, the lobby is rigged, and the support pillars behind you are rigged. She looked at each guard in turn. Vincent was very busy while you were voting. The guards hesitated, looked at each other, calculated odds. You're bluffing, Dmitri said. Elena tilted her head. I'm the woman who blew up the Pierre Hotel 3 hours ago. 300 witnesses. Half the NYPD responded. Do you really want to test whether I'm bluffing? The guards lowered their weapons, slowly, reluctantly, but they lowered them. Marcus wheeled himself to the head of the table. Each rotation of the wheels was agony. His chest screamed at him. The bandages beneath his shirt were soaked with blood. But he didn't show it. He looked at his chair, the seat of power, then at Dmitri. You told them I was incompetent, Marcus said. His voice was calm, measured. You told them I killed an innocent waitress. You told them I was weak. Dmitri pulled a handgun from his waistband. Their father's Makarov, the same gun he'd used to shoot Marcus at the Pierre. You are weak, he screamed. You let a woman distract you. You let sentiment rot your brain. I am the strong one. I did what had to be done. You killed our father, Marcus said simply. The room erupted. The Dons looked at each other. Patricide, the ultimate sin, the one crime that transcended business. Family was supposed to be sacred. Lies, Dmitri shouted. He aimed the gun at Marcus's heart, or where Marcus's heart would be if he were standing. He died in an accident. Marcus nodded to Elena. Play it. Elena tapped her phone. The boardroom's speaker system crackled to life. First, audio from the Pierre Hotel, captured by the microphone in the podium before the explosion. Dmitri's voice, clear and unmistakable. I had to burn to become something, Marcus. I had to die to be born. Then earlier audio, from a hidden bug Elena had planted on Vincent before his capture. Dmitri giving orders to subordinates. Rig the brakes on the Mercedes. Neither of them will survive the crash. Make sure Alexei is driving. I want him to feel it when they go over the embankment. The silence that followed was crushing. Don Moretti stood slowly. His chair scraped against the floor. He looked at Dmitri with an expression that mixed disgust and rage. You killed Roman, your own brother. The other family heads rose. Don Patrick O'Malley from the Irish mob. His face was red. This is an abomination. Mikhail Sokolov, Elena's distant uncle, spat on the floor. You shame us all. Amir Hassan shook his head. We do not accept a kinslayer as leader. Carlos Mendoza reached inside his jacket. For a weapon. For justice. Dmitri looked around the room. His eyes were wild, desperate. The guards had backed away from him. The Dons were reaching for their guns. He was alone, cornered. He backed toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Manhattan. 42 stories of empty air between him and the street. He was old, Dmitri yelled. His composure cracked like ice. He was holding us back. I built the Black Lotus. I created something greater. I am the future. You are nothing, Marcus said. He tried to stand from the wheelchair. Pain exploded through his chest. His vision grayed at the edges. But Elena was there, supporting him. He rose to his feet, swaying, barely standing, but standing. He faced his brother. You aren't a king, Dmitri. You're just a jealous little boss playing with matches. Dmitri's eyes darted around the room, calculating, looking for an exit. The elevator was blocked by Marcus. The guards had abandoned him. The Dons wanted his blood. There was no escape. A twisted smile formed on his scarred face. The burns from the crash made it grotesque. If I can't have the crown, he whispered, then nobody can. He raised the Makarov, but not at Marcus, at the pressurized gas line that ran along the ceiling, the line that fed the building's heating system. One shot and this whole floor becomes a fireball, Dmitri said. We all die together. Like a family should. Marcus took a step forward. His leg nearly gave out. You won't do it. You're a survivor, Dmitri. You've been one your whole life. That's why you faked your death. That's why you hid for 5 years. You survive. You don't martyr. You don't know me, brother. His finger tightened on the trigger. Elena made a calculation. Distance, angle, probability of success. She drew her Glock and fired. The bullet hit Dmitri in the shoulder. His right shoulder, the gun hand. The Makarov fell from his grip, clattering on the marble floor, but the momentum carried him backward. The window behind him was reinforced, bulletproof, designed to withstand hurricane-force winds. But Dmitri weighed 200 pounds, and he was moving fast. The glass held for a moment, then spiderwebbed, then shattered. Dmitri's eyes went wide. He reached out, grasping for anything. His hand found Marcus's sleeve. For one terrible moment, they were connected. Brother to brother, Marcus felt the pull, felt gravity trying to take them both. Elena grabbed Marcus, pulled him back, her strength against Dmitri's weight. The fabric tore. Dmitri fell. He didn't scream. He just dropped. A white figure against the night sky, growing smaller, falling into the city lights below, 42 stories down. They didn't hear the impact. Too high up, too much wind. But they knew. Marcus stood at the shattered edge. Wind howled around him. Rain was starting to fall again. The city stretched out below like a circuit board. Millions of lights. Millions of lives. Elena pulled him back from the edge. It's over, Marcus. It's done. Marcus looked at her, then at the Dons who were staring at him with a mixture of fear and respect. Acknowledging the true king, he didn't care about them. He turned to Elena, cupped her face in his hands, rested his forehead against hers. Let's go home, he said. 3 days later, Marcus was discharged from Dr. Reed's makeshift clinic. The wound was healing, slowly, painfully, but healing. He could walk now without Elena's support, though he still moved like an old man. Careful, deliberate. The bullet had done permanent damage. His left shoulder had limited mobility, chronic pain that would never fully go away. Dr. Reed had been honest. You'll never be what you were. The tissue damage is extensive. You might need a cane eventually. Definitely pain management for the rest of your life. A price. Everything had a price. They returned to New York, not to the penthouse. The FBI had seized it, stripped it, turned Marcus's home into evidence. Instead, they went to Elena's safe house. Storage Unit 404 in Queens. It was cramped, uncomfortable. Nothing like the luxury Marcus was accustomed to. But Elena was there, and that made it home. The first night back, Vincent arrived with news. The family's voted, he said. You're chairman. Marcus sat on the cot. He was reviewing encrypted files that Zero had sent, reorganizing what was left of his empire. After everything, they respect strength. You survived Dmitri, survived the FBI, survived a bullet to the chest. You're a legend now, boss. I don't want to be a legend. I want to be alive. Vincent nodded. There's a complication, though. What? The Sokolov family wants in. Mikhail claims blood right through Elena. Elena stopped cooking. She'd been attempting to make pasta on a portable stove. Attempting being the key word. What? He wants a seat at the table. Says if you marry her, Russians get equal stake in the new power structure. Marcus looked at Elena. Do you want that? Power? Elena thought about it. She remembered the girl who had drowned in the East River 5 years ago. The woman who had spent half a decade planning revenge. The survivor who had fallen in love with the man who had insulted her. No, she said finally. I want freedom. I want to raise a family somewhere they don't have to carry guns to feel safe. Marcus set his files aside. Then we walk away. Vincent's eyes widened. You can't walk away. You're chairman. Watch me. 2 weeks later, Marcus called a meeting of the 5 families. Not at Volkov Tower. The FBI still had it under surveillance. Instead, they met at the Velvet Rose, the restaurant where it had all started. Marcus sat at table 1, where he had spilled wine on Elena, where she had revealed herself in Russian, where his world had changed forever. He didn't bring his cane, pride wouldn't allow it, but each step to the table had been agony. Elena sat beside him, not behind, not as a subordinate, as an equal. The 5 Dons arrived, Moretti, O'Malley, Hassan, Mendoza, and Mikhail Sokolov, Elena's distant uncle. They sat, ordered drinks they wouldn't finish, waited. I'm stepping down as chairman, Marcus said. The room erupted. Protests, arguments, disbelief. Moretti slammed his hand on the table. You can't. This is unprecedented. I can and I am. I'm appointing Vincent Cross as my successor. He's loyal, He's smart, and he doesn't have a bullet lodged near his spine. Mikhail leaned forward. And what of you? You just vanish? I'm retiring to somewhere warm, somewhere without extradition treaties. O'Malley shook his head. You're abandoning the empire your father built. Marcus stood. Elena helped him. Subtle, gentle, but necessary. He looked each Don in the eye. My father is dead because of this empire. Dmitri became a monster because of it. I almost died because of it. He paused. I won't let my child grow up in that world. The Dons went silent. Child. Nobody had mentioned a child. Elena's hand went unconsciously to her stomach. Still flat. Still early. But there. You have a choice, Marcus continued. Accept Vincent as chairman and let us leave in peace. Or try to stop us and see what happens when a man with nothing left to lose decides to burn everything down. The silence stretched. Finally, Moretti nodded. We accept. God go with you, Marcus Volkov. The others agreed one by one, grudging, but accepting. Marcus and Elena stood. They walked out of the Velvet Rose together, out into the Manhattan night, into an uncertain future. Behind them, table 1 sat empty, a wine glass half full, untouched, a monument to the night that had changed everything. 6 months later, the coastal town in Costa Rica didn't have a name that appeared on most maps, just a collection of white houses on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the kind of place people went to disappear, to start over, to forget. Marcus stood on the veranda of their modest villa, white walls, terracotta roof, bougainvillea climbing up the sides in a riot of purple and pink. The morning sun was warm on his face. The ocean stretched infinite below. He wore linen now, loose pants, simple shirts. His hair was slightly longer, his face more relaxed than it had been in a decade. He still used a cane. The injury had never fully healed, probably never would, but he'd made peace with it. Physical pain was the price of survival. He was reading news on a tablet when Elena emerged from the kitchen, 8 months pregnant, radiant, wearing a sundress that accommodated her swollen belly. She moved with the careful grace of someone carrying precious cargo. You're smiling, she said. Vincent brokered a peace treaty between the 5 families. First time in 20 years they've agreed on anything. You miss it, Elena said. Not a question, a statement. Marcus considered lying, but he'd promised to never lie to her. I miss the strategy, the chess game, the feeling of controlling something larger than myself. He paused, set the tablet down, stood with the help of his cane and walked to her. But I don't miss the violence, the fear, the wondering which of my own men would betray me next. He touched her swollen belly, felt the baby kick. Strong, healthy, alive. This is better. They walked to the edge of the veranda. The ocean was calm today, glittering like diamonds under the sun. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked, walking away. Marcus thought about it. Every Tuesday. She laughed. Why Tuesday? Because Tuesday was when I used to meet with my accountants, review investments, make decisions that affected thousands of lives. I miss the structure. But I don't miss the what. This wound still aches when it rains. I can't lift our daughter when she's born. My left shoulder has maybe 60% mobility. He looked at her. These are prices I paid for power. Was it worth it? Depends on when you ask me. Today? He kissed her forehead. Today, it was worth it. The satellite phone rang. Only 3 people had the number. Vincent, Dr. Reed, 0. Marcus answered. Vincent? Boss. Vincent's voice was tense. We have a problem. Black Lotus remnants. Marcus's jaw tightened. I thought we dismantled the organization when Dmitri died. He was the head, but the body survived. They've regrouped under new leadership. Someone who calls himself the gardener. What do they want? Revenge. For Dmitri. They know you're alive, boss, and they know where you are. Elena watched Marcus's face change. The relaxed retirement mask slipping, the old predator surfacing underneath. How long do I have? Marcus asked. Maybe a week, maybe a month. The gardener is patient, methodical. He's been planning this for months. Marcus looked at Elena, at her pregnant belly, at the peaceful life they'd built on this cliff overlooking paradise, at the cane leaning against the wall, a reminder that he couldn't fight like he used to. Vincent, send 0. I need a full security detail. 2 weeks. Can you give me 2 weeks? 2 weeks for what? 2 weeks to meet my daughter. After that, I'm coming back. Coming back? Boss, you retired. Retirement isn't the same as surrender. I'm coming back. Not to lead, but to end this. Permanently. He hung up. Elena stared at him. You said you were done. I said I was retired. There's a difference. She smiled. Not a happy smile, but an understanding one. You'll never truly be out, will you? Maybe not, but I can make sure our daughter is. 2 weeks later, Elena went into labor. The birth was complicated. 20 hours of pain, emergency procedures. But when their daughter finally arrived, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with strong lungs and her mother's eyes, everything else faded away. They named her Anastasia. It meant resurrection. Marcus held her in his right arm. His left couldn't support the weight. He looked at her tiny face and saw the future. Saw hope. Saw everything he'd been fighting for without knowing it. She's perfect, he whispered. Elena, exhausted but smiling, reached out to touch their daughter's hand. She's worth everything. Marcus looked out of the hospital window. The Costa Rican sunset painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Beautiful. Terrible. A reminder that even a paradise had sharp edges. He knew the gardener was still coming. Knew he'd have to fight again. Knew he might not survive. But right now, in this moment, holding his daughter, while the woman he loved recovered beside him, Marcus Volkov was at peace. Lena's voice brought him back. What are you thinking? That the stain never washes out. What stain? The crimson one. From that night at the restaurant. From the preemin. From the blood. He looked at Anastasia. It just spreads. Is that a bad thing? Marcus watched his daughter sleep. Innocent. Unaware of the world's darkness. Unaware that her father had killed men. That her mother had died and been reborn in violence. I don't know yet. Ask me in 20 years when she's old enough to understand what her father was. And what will you tell her? The truth. That I was a bad man who tried to be good. And the only reason I succeeded, even a little, was because her mother saved me. Elena reached for his hand, their fingers interlaced, scarred, calloused, but together. We saved each other, she said. Marcus kissed their joined hands. Yes, we did. Outside, the sun set over the Pacific, crimson light bleeding into darkness. In the parking lot below, a figure watched the window. Patient, waiting. The gardener. War wasn't over. It never was. But for tonight, Marcus Volkov had something more valuable than an empire. He had a family, he had a future, and he had the woman who had turned his world upside down with 7 words in Russian and a spilled glass of wine. The crimson stain had spread from Manhattan to Costa Rica, from a restaurant table to a hospital room, from violence to love. It would spread further still. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, Marcus Volkov was simply a father holding his daughter. And that was enough. The end.